Having a good product is not enough either. You've actually got to have a purpose. You've got to have a reason for doing what you do. When you have a reason and you have a product and you combine that with great delivery, great engineering, you combine that with problem solving and a pursuit of excellence, you combine that with a design-led approach, then it's what I call the excellence of everything. Like, it's not really even possible to achieve, but somehow we've achieved it.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 110 of the Startup Playbook podcast. I'm your host Rohit Bhargava, and each week I interview successful founders, investors, and subject matter experts on how they got started, the strategies they used to succeed, and their advice to current and future entrepreneurs. I'm delighted to have Dom Pym, the co-founder of Up, as my guest for this episode. Up was the first neobank to launch in Australia in October 2018, and within 8 months had already amassed 100,000 customers. And they currently have over 230,000 very happy customers all around the country. Prior to Up, Dom had been involved in technology for over 20 years, from startups to enterprises throughout Australia, the UK, the US, and throughout Asia. In this interview, we covered a range of topics, including Dom's hiring process to find the right team fit, Up's approach to product-led growth, how Up utilized and leveraged their community of customers to become their biggest advocate, balancing customer feature requests with the product roadmap, and much more. Before we jump into this episode, I just wanted to highlight that we had a few connectivity issues when doing this interview. Unfortunately, it's one of the downsides when moving from all in-person interviews to moving online due to COVID. However, this is still a fantastic interview, and I personally took so much away from some of the insights that Dom shared, and I'm sure you will as well. If there's any point in the interview that you'd like further information or wasn't as clear, email me at rohit@startupplaybook.co and I'll do my best to follow that up for you. Also, at the end of this interview, Dom and the team at Up have graciously offered a special reward for listeners of this show, so make sure that you stick around to claim your reward. With that out of the way, and without further ado, here is my interview with Dom Pym. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 110 of the Startup Playbook podcast. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. Delighted to have Dom Pym, the co-founder of Up Banking, on the show today as our guest. Before we get into this episode, just wanted to run through the format if this is your first time joining. So Dom and I will be doing an interview as per normal for the podcast for about the next 45 to 50 minutes, but we'll leave the last 10 minutes for Q&A from the audience. So thank you for all of you that have sent through questions via the registration process. There is also a Q&A tab and a chat function available at the bottom of your screen. So if you'd like to submit questions as we go along, I'll pick out a handful of them at the end of this episode. But without further ado, Dom, welcome to the Startup Playbook podcast, and thanks so much for taking the time to join us this morning.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much for having me.
So Dom, for those people that may not be as familiar with you or your background, do you want to share a little bit about your story and what got you here today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the co-founder of Up, which is Australia's sort of first new generation digital bank. And it's a mobile only bank, and it was the first retail bank in Australia to be cloud hosted. So there's lots of firsts there. But basically it's innovative and it's new and it's exciting. It's also at the moment one of the fastest growing banks in Australia. So we've been up in the sort of top of the App Store and the Google Play Store for the last 18 months, which has been pretty incredible and an amazing journey. In terms of my background, before running Up is a collaboration between Ferocia, which is my technology company, and Bendigo and Adelaide Bank. And so before we started Ferocia, I've got involved in Fintechs and software companies, all over the world. From, I've lived and worked in Singapore, Japan, South Korea, the US, the UK. I've got companies in New Zealand, Canada, all over the place. And I guess for me, I call it like the baptism of fire. Like in my teens and in my 20s, I travel around the world and built software for Fortune 500 companies. And that was sort of my learning curve before I ended up in Silicon Valley and, working on software development sort of, just after the dot-com boom, or actually just before the dot-com boom, and then again, just after. And so that experience was sort of, really the foundation of what made me really interested in being an entrepreneur and interested in fintechs and interested in software and probably more than anything else, interested in people, like the resilience of people and the way that, some people that I've worked with for 10 years or more, the relationships you develop is just quite extraordinary. So my background now has progressed. Like in the last 20 years, I've started companies and sold companies and built teams. And now I probably have, something in the vicinity of 20 companies around the world that I've invested in or backed. and a handful of those that I've co-founded, including Ferocia, which is now, I think, coming up for about 10 years. And my business partner, Grant Thomas, we've been in business together over several different companies for 12 and a half years. So that's a quick snippet of sort of my background and how I sort of came into Up, I guess.
It's obviously a fascinating journey. Like I obviously am a customer of Up and love the product and sort of knew you through that. And doing research for this interview, I was kind of fascinated by the journey that you've had to date. Really curious to, like, obviously we'll kind of speak about Up and your kind of specific journey with that, but really curious to know, you mentioned that you're sort of involved with about 20 companies at the moment, and you've been involved in everything from enterprise to startups over the last 20 plus years. How do you assess different opportunities that come across your plate as well? I think one thing that I've really taken away from the podcast and from my own experiences, often it's not a lack of opportunities. It's often there are so many different opportunities that are available in front of you. How do you assess what the right ones are for you that you should devote time in, sort of get behind and devote your energy to when you're already splitting your focus between so many different things?
Are we back?
You're back.
No worries. So I was just, no, that's fine. It's a good question. I was just saying there's probably off the cuff, there's probably two or three things. I'd say three things that would be interesting and relevant. One is someone famous once said, you're sort of defined by what you say no to, not what you say yes to. And so I think saying no and being comfortable with that is a really important, I guess, first principle. The second for me, interested in towards, it's not necessarily by design. It's just that now I end up involved in different, credit card businesses, whatever, sort of all around the world. Just naturally have sort of been attracted to them. And I would say the third thing is people. So for me, it's been, especially at Ferocia, a lot about building the greatest team of people that I know and working with the best people I've worked with all over the world, and then bringing them together in Melbourne as a team. I'll just try, I've got a couple of internet connections. I'll just try another one.
Great. Sorry, everyone that's listening in. We did do a tech test beforehand. So unfortunately, this is one of the drawbacks of trying to do interviews online. But we'll try and reconnect and see if this works a little bit better.
Better or worse? I went to the backup.
Yeah, I think that sounds a little bit better. So Dom, I think you got cut off when you were talking about bringing great people and being able to work with great people, if you wouldn't mind.
No, that's fine. Yeah, so I think like for me, it's been about bringing a great group of people together, the best people, software engineers that I worked with in the world, and bringing them all together in Melbourne to work on building great stuff. But it works just the same. Great people and that philosophy works the same for investing. So one of my co-founders in my last company was Marty Howell, and he was a co-founder of realestate.com.au. And so if he invests in a business, then I'm like, well, he's done the due diligence. It must be a great business, and it makes it easier for me to make that decision. And similarly, with Jason Kalkonis or someone like that is maybe investing in syndicates or backing startups or whatever, it does make it easier to gravitate towards people that you know and people that you trust. And that helps you to assess spending your time and what's the best use of your time or money if you're investing.
The whole concept of great businesses being great, but built by great people has come up so many times on this podcast, both from founders as well as from investor guests that we've had on the show. What does that specifically look like, especially when you're looking to build, the first digital bank in Australia? What does that process look like in terms of identifying what the skills are that you need, but also making sure that you're sort of vetting and bringing on the right people, because the first 10 to 20 hires really sort of set the tone for the business?
Yeah, so a lot of it has got to do with attitude more than it does experience. Like having experience is kind of, I guess, a gimme. Like you've got to have really people that are smart but have also delivered success before. Like that's sort of a give. It's a given. But I think that is not the most important attribute. The most important attribute is creative thinking. Design thinking, ability to think outside the square and solve problems. So for me, people who are comfortable sort of self-managing and are comfortable with problem solving are really great candidates for success, because you don't need to tell them exactly what to do or how to do it. You just need to steer them in the direction of the problem that you want to solve. And then they naturally have a sort of curiosity. And a lot of the time I have talked quite a bit about my influences. And when I was younger, I listened to Dr. Carl on the radio or whatever, and I think on Triple J. And he said something that stuck with me my whole life. And I can't find the quote, so I don't, maybe it wasn't him, but I feel like it was. It was basically saying that the attributes of any successful person are confidence and curiosity. And so I think those are really two interesting things to think about, because you can be smart but not confident, or you can have a lot of experience but not be curious. And I think that those two attributes help an entrepreneur to stay focused on problem solving, on the things that they want to do well at, but then also allow them to speak like I speak, comfortably in a public forum or on an interview or whatever. And so I think that confidence and curiosity together as 1 + 1 = 3. Like they really help amplify the personality and help amplify that problem solving capability.
Absolutely. How do you test for that, especially on the curiosity front? I know in my current workplace, one of the things that we look for is, past experience, and and Nick Crocker mentioned this in the last episode as well, in terms of looking at the actual data points behind what people say. I'm just wondering how you sort of test for smarts and kind of curiosity through your interview process.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think a lot of success starts with, in terms of building a team in the interview process. So I guess culling the process to the point where you're only accepting, or you're only interviewing the people that, what you feed into the funnel, shit in, shit out is a way that people say it. It's not usually the way I talk about people, but I think that is like a sort of a common understanding that you've really got to have high quality in to get high quality out. So basically you want to shortlist the people that you're meeting. In our case, what we typically tend to do is we basically have 1 degree separation. So the people that we hire have worked with, or are known to have worked with, people that have worked in the team. And that means that scales to probably a couple of hundred people. So that means that in the very early stages of growing a new business, you reduce the risk because these people, you can trust these people. But where we're interviewing someone that perhaps, we've maybe worked with remotely, or we've worked on an open source project with, but we don't actually know them personally, the trick for us has been asking them those sort of questions. I don't care what programming language they use. I don't care whether they use AWS or GCP and that sort of stuff. It doesn't matter. Well, what I care about is, what are their hobbies? What's their life situation? What are their interests? What do they do? What books have they read? Do they like traveling? What do they do in their spare time? Do they play with model trains, or do they pull apart computers? Do they like using a soldering iron, or do they like baking? Those are the things that give you some indications about someone's personality and the way they think. And so for me, I'm usually the last part of the interview process. People sort of go to myself or my business partner, once we've been through a technical interview and an introductory interview, and we've looked at cultural fit and those sort of things. It finally comes to us, and they're the sort of things that we're really interested in, because that team fit and that ability to be curious and to have those sort of hobbies outside of work, I think is what gives us a good indication that they're, number one, going to fit in our team, and then number two, going to have those traits that I think are pretty important.
One of the things that you just touched on with people was, being curious and sort of pointing them at a problem and essentially letting them figure out that solution. If I have this correct, you launched Up with less than 30 people. So the first online digital bank with less than 30 people on the team. What was, what were some of the more unexpected challenges that came up through that process? I don't know how much you can share in terms of the actual journey, but really curious in terms of it was the first time that problem specifically was being solved in Australia. Like, what were some of the things that your team wasn't expecting as you were preparing to launch?
Yeah, well, first of all, we kind of cheated because we had this great partner, Bendigo and Adelaide Bank, and so we've been working with Bendigo for, at the time, 5 years, and we built their mobile internet banking system, which is the 5th largest banking platform in Australia. So that gives us a really good foundation, not only in delivering technology to 1.8 million people, but actually a foundation of trust. Bendigo trusted us to have a crack at solving the problem for building a mobile-only digital bank. So I guess that that foundation of trust is really the cheat's way to be able to do it with less people and do it faster. And maybe I'm being a little bit humble. I mean, it is a big challenge to do something like that, but I think having great partners to do it. So we partner with Bendigo first, then we partner with MasterCard, then we partner with Google. That made our job a hell of a lot easier. So as the first sort of cloud-hosted retail bank in Australia, we had the privilege of working with Google on rolling out that new technology here in Australia. And so for us, that was, it was fairly mind-blowing, but at the same time, it made our task a little bit easier. So I guess the challenges that we faced were that it's the path less trodden. So it's when you're doing something new and different and interesting, before Up launch. So nowadays, a lot of banks are talking about, you can sign up in 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever it is. But before Up launched, you could not do that in Australia. We'd seen some of that happening overseas, particularly in the UK and in Russia, for example. But what we'd not seen in Australia is the ability to sign up in less than a week or in less than a few days, or not go to a branch, or not wait for the card to come in the mail. And so there was just no way to sign up a bank account really quickly. When we launched, you could sign up a bank account in less than 3 minutes. You download the app from Google Play or from the App Store, and just away you go. And within average of 2 minutes and 12 seconds, and it sort of hovers, so it's still less than 3 minutes, but it sort of hovers how long it takes. But if you could sign up a bank account, and actually, we provided people with a $5 or a $10 sort of incentive in their bank account when they signed up, so they could sign up a bank account and then instantly buy something. So our vision, our goal, and the way to specifically answer your question, the way that we solve problems like that is to set ourselves a task, a goal. What are we trying to achieve? And the goal that we set up, the little use case, was that imagine you were in a cafe, and obviously coffee's pretty popular in Melbourne. Imagine you're in a cafe and you were standing in line, and you found out about Up. Your friend sent you a text message, or you saw, maybe an advertisement on the cash register or whatever it is. By the time you get to the front of the coffee queue, how do you pay for your coffee with your phone? You've opened a bank account, you've got a digital wallet, and we're the first bank in Australia to do instant issuance of digital wallets. And then you pay for your coffee. So that was our dream, and we thought, probably got 5 years to build that sort of reality. We built it in about 3 months, and within 6 months we were in production, and all the staff were using it, and we were literally going to our local cafe and signing up bank accounts and buying coffee. And so I think that having that goal is really the glue of what sort of held us together and said, right, we're all aiming towards the same thing. It's our sort of Northern Star. How do we achieve that outcome? And then I don't need to sort of motivate people or say, or micromanage people, because everyone's heading in the same direction. It's actually easier for people to make decisions, and those micro decisions that they make towards that goal are actually the decisions that you can't manage. They're decisions that people make in their own mind, and you want them to make 100 of those in a day. And so I think that having that sort of guiding light is really, really important, particularly in a startup.
I read in a previous interview that you did that Up was shipping sort of 5 to 6 times a day. And I imagine that it's a little bit different for a lot of your sort of incumbent challenges in the space. How strategic was that sort of decision-making process in terms of committing to, the sign-up process should be within minutes rather than weeks? How did you, was that a byproduct of the product that you were developing, or how sort of strategic was that focus in terms of speeding up those processes for customers?
Yeah, so probably there's a couple of questions in there, but firstly, we're all engineers. So I'm a software developer. We don't have like a CEO of Up, we don't sort of have titles and things, but if there was a CEO or a co-founder, that's me. And the way that we think about that is that there's no other bank, digital or incumbent or otherwise, in Australia where the leader is a software developer. So they're all bankers. So they think very differently, first of all. Secondly, because we're all engineers and product people and hands-on, we don't have any salespeople, or we don't have any middle management. We don't have any enterprise architects, or whatever it is. Everybody is an engineer, which means that what we're good at is delivery, is focus, is delivering technology, delivering software. So for us, that cadence that you mentioned of having a goal, our goal was to deliver 5 production deployments a day, so that we just continuously be shipping to customers. And we've exceeded that, actually, and we ship more than an average of 5. At the moment, it's about 6 or 7, software releases a day, which goes out to customers a little bit less frequently, but we all use that software. We eat our own dog food. So that's the first thing, is that our expertise is delivery. So it makes sense for us to do that and to be much, much faster than anybody else at that. But then the other side of it for us is, I guess you could call it excellence. Like, we have frustration with the way that the banking sector was operating. So we'd been operating in it for 5 years, and things just felt slow and they felt frustrating. And we tried to build digital banks a couple of times with some other partners, and big, big 4-pillar banks in Australia, and big projects throughout Asia and all that sort of stuff. And it was just really hard. It felt morose. It felt like you took 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It was just really hard and frustrating to deliver that awesome outcome. So for us, we just thought, why not do it ourselves? Why don't we actually just have a crack at it and solve the problems that we've always wanted to solve? We wanted to be the first bank to launch without a traditional username and password. You don't need that, because there's technology now on phones with devices, and we can secure every single communication and encrypt it. So why do we need to have the traditional ways of authenticating people? Why do we need to have it running in a web browser when we can run it as a native mobile app? As a native mobile app, we can do real-time push notifications. We can deliver so much data and insights to people. So for us, like excellence, having design as part of our thinking and as part of everything we do, it just changed the way we thought about the problem. And we were just coming at it from an engineering perspective, not coming at it from a banking perspective. Actually, we have a word for it. We call it, or a phrase, we call it technology-led banking, right? So we just like to say that, the way that we think about it is technology-led banking is it sounds subtly different, but it's very different than bank-led technology. And I often ask people, name a bank in the world that's good at technology. And that's exactly the answer I normally get, right? Is a lot of people don't know and they can't think of one. And it's not that they don't exist. They do exist. There's a few around. A BBVA in Spain or DBS in Singapore. In Australia, people might say Commonwealth Bank, but I think they're wrong. But they might say that because of marketing or whatever. And so, there's a few banks around the world that can do technology and they're okay at it. But if you think about technology companies that have completely disrupted an industry, you can just rattle them off. Amazon, Airbnb, Uber, like there's so many companies that have just come into the market and completely disrupted the market dynamic. And they're not from that industry. They're software companies and they think about engineering and problem solving differently. That's exactly what technology-led banking is for Up. It's Ferocia coming in and delivering a completely new and different way of approaching that problem. And so far, customers have just loved it.
Speaking of technology-led banking or kind of the focus on product as well, so prior to my current role, I was running a digital marketing agency and a lot of my background is digital marketing and growth. And one of the things that when potential clients would come to us was us assessing how good their product is, because I really believe that marketing won't solve a shitty product, but it should really sort of help accelerate existing great products that are out there. Like it's just there to kind of put the accelerant on top of something that's already fantastic. And that's kind of one of the things that I kind of see about Up is I don't really see you doing sort of marketing, but your product and your sort of user experience is so great that your customers essentially become a growth engine for you. So, Up is, to my understanding, Up got sort of 100,000 customers in the first 8 months, and then you're currently at 200,000 customers. Can you talk a little bit again about what some of the growth strategies are, sort of how you approach design as kind of a core component of the growth of the business?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like just for example, we don't usually release all of our information publicly, but I've tried to keep everyone up to date with the growth because it's fairly phenomenal. Even just like, you say, well, we're at 200,000 customers. Well, actually 8 weeks ago, we're at 200,000 customers. Today we're at 230. Like we've added 30,000 customers just in the last, 8 weeks or whatever it is, 6 or 8 weeks. So, we are growing very fast. And that even in difficult times, we've been maintaining that sort of growth. And I think that for us, I just align exactly with what you say. I mean, I think you put it very eloquently, which is marketing in itself is not a solution to a problem. And so for us, it's about delivering an amazing product and then, creating basically customer advocates. And it's not a deliberate strategy to do that. We just love what we do and it comes through in the product. So by making a great product and having a really good product market fit, customers pick up on that and then they become the advocates. And we don't have to do a lot of traditional marketing. We don't do any really traditional marketing. We don't have to do a lot of digital marketing. What we have to do is basically just amplify the message. And I think there's two important parts, and it's worth saying that product is not everything. I mean, we love product and we're all engineers and we're very focused on delivery. But product is a really important part of it. The other is actually what you stand for. Who we are, what we stand for, our ethic, what drives us to get out of bed every day and to deliver this amazing product. Is just as important, if not more important, than the product itself. I think the two are intertwined. I don't think you can sort of separate them really. And the reason why you see that sort of crazy quirkiness and fun sort of coming through in the Up product is that's who we are. That represents the development team. So I think that those two things are interlinked, but I do think about them, and particularly if I'm sort of and I think that there's a lot of luck involved. There's a lot of good timing, but having that fastidious focus on quality and then having a guiding light the whole team can get behind. We're about partnering with the right partners that share an ethical alignment. We're about doing the right thing by our customers. We're about helping our customers reconnect with their money. We don't want people to be distressed or financially insecure. We want people to actually be comfortable in their own skin with their money. We want people to understand where their money's going, or where they're spending it, how they're saving it. We want people to just feel reconnected with money, which is, we've lost that connection in the last couple of decades, and helping people to understand the data, understand their spending habits, and feel comfortable with their money again really drives us and helps us to think about, well, what are the quirky features that we have? What are the things that we do that no one else has ever done before? And why do we do them? The product is one part of that, but the purpose is probably the most important part.
One thing that I'll add as a customer of yours, and what I've seen online as well, is just the community that you've been able to build as well. Everything from kind of new product releases to even just, I remember when Up first launched, just the craziness around the swag. And everyone wanted Up swag as well. How have you sort of fostered and built up that sort of community, or how do you sort of think about that community as well in terms of the way that you, as you mentioned, not just build your product, but kind of give that whole sort of life cycle of helping your customers?
Yeah, so for us, it's about integrating what we do with people's lives, and merch is a great example. We all wear Up merch every day, and so we're very proud of it. And we're even prouder when we walk down the street. Like, I was walking down Collins Street in Melbourne a few months ago now, back in January, and I walked past someone in the street, and they're wearing an Up t-shirt, and they gave me a high five. And I don't know this person. I mean, it's just there's just a customer in the street. It's the most amazing feeling that you can imagine. And so I think that for us, that's not the reason that we do merch. We do merch because we really like high quality stuff. So when we see what not just banks but other startups have produced, a lot of it is just a substitute for crappy marketing. It's just advertising. It's really shit, and it's not interesting for us. What's interesting for us is creating really high quality merch. And then if you send someone just a badge or a t-shirt or a sticker or something that is really amazing, they're like, oh my God, I never expected that from a bank, number one. And then number two, I saw an App Store review just, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and someone was saying, oh, I've got this merch and it's amazing and I wear it every day. I saw a tweet yesterday of someone saying 80% of the time I'm in my Up t-shirt. Just to hear people say those sort of things. You wouldn't wear your Up t-shirt if it was just some crappy thing that had a logo slapped on it. I think also subtlety. So you can see, even just when I'm wearing an Up brand, it's very subtle. Like, I don't need to have it like just, flaming all over the place and everywhere. We like the vibrancy and we like the excitement of our brand, but we don't need to the brand isn't everything. I think that what the brand means and what the brand means to people becomes really important. And so all of those early adopters, we call them upsiders. So anybody that gets on Up, is an upsider. And we have casual language, like people hook up their mates. Why do we call a hook up a mate? Because that's what we do. And no one else in the world calls their referral program hook up a mate. First of all, they probably have to be in Australia to do that. And then secondly, we coined the phrase, and so now everybody's using it. But I think it's really awesome because it just demonstrates, exactly to your question, how people have become sort of fanatical. I mean, they use Up and they're like, I'd never imagined my bank would be so cool. I never imagined my bank would send me this merch. I never imagined my bank would be so easy to use. And a lot of people will write into us and say, for the first time in my life, I'm saving money. Or I've never been, I never really understood where my money's going, and now I understand, and it helps me to budget better or to think more about my finances. And I think that those kind of things are really important. And again, it's the same quality metrics that we're talking about. Having a pursuit of excellence, embedding design in what we do when we do our merch or whatever. But it's the same for our newsletter. Like, we get people who literally send us hundreds, maybe even more than thousands of people that send us messages when we send our newsletter out, saying, I have a spam filter and I'm not interested in newsletters from companies or whatever, but I always read the Up one every single month and it's amazing. And to hear those sort of things, like, it's worth it. Like, whenever we send a newsletter, Higgsy is just amazing. He does our newsletters. He often sends it to me kind of at the last minute and says, do you want to have a quick look, Dom? And I think that attention to detail, I'm a co-founder of the business, and I read the newsletter before it goes out to our customers and just make sure if there's a couple of little spelling errors or if, the animation's not quite right, whatever it is. I think that sort of care it shines through, and customers see that, and then they want to be like that. So then the customer picks it up, recommends it to their friend, and they just become advocates. So that's been our significantly our greatest referral business. Like it's been our largest channel of growth has come from customers referring their family and friends to Up. And that's represented, I think, nearly 50% or around 50% of our total growth.
You spoke about subtlety. Dom, I still don't have any upswag at all. So who do I need to message to answer?
I will sort you out now.
So Dom, one of the things that I found really interesting is Up launching kind of their roadmap or sort of product strategy, which generally in tech isn't that common, as well as, you don't necessarily see a lot of people being so forward in terms of what they're sort of planning to release over the coming year, and definitely not something that I would imagine a lot of banks would normally do. What was kind of the thinking or the approach behind sort of publicly releasing your product roadmap, and what sort of led to that?
Yeah, so I guess my partner in crime, my business partner, but also Anson. Anson was our first employee at Ferocia. He's been on the whole journey, and I call him our chief imaginer. But he's sort of our head of product at Up, and he's the best person, obviously, to answer that, like, because a lot of it comes out of his brain. But having worked with Anson now for, I think, nearly at least 8 years, nearly 9 years. I sort of feel like I have a good idea about what makes him tick, and him and I have a lot of discussions around this sort of stuff. And one of the things that was fascinating for us was that, with the exception of probably Monzo in the UK and maybe one other bank in the world, nobody had published a roadmap. And anybody in technology that was publishing roadmaps were publishing a Trello board or maybe a blog post, with a list of features or whatever. And so for us, it wasn't just about publishing a roadmap. It was about, the tree of Up is about an insight into Anson's brain. Like it's about, seeing sort of the way we think. It provides context. It's a very visual medium. If anyone hasn't seen it, they should check it out. It's a crazy idea for a roadmap because it shows you everything we've built, everything we're currently building, and everything we're planning to build. And it shows it to you all in one big map that, looks like a tree and has branches and all that sort of stuff. But it provides context. So what we found is that probably twofold, two reasons why we did that. One was to communicate transparently who we are, what we stand for, and what we're doing. We're not afraid of competition. We're very comfortable in our ability to execute and deliver. And so we're happy for people to know what we're doing. And a lot of people are copying what we're doing right now, but they're not doing it as good as us, and they're not doing it as fast as us. So that's okay. So we wanted to communicate mostly with our customers about what it is that we're doing. But one of the other reasons was that we have a tool in the software called Talk to Us. And it's basically like a chat service where people can just chat with us anytime. We do 18/7 in terms of manning it with humans. And it's pretty amazing that the interaction, so our average response time is less than 2 minutes. And we get thousands of inquiries every day. And a lot of those inquiries are ideas. People say, would it be great if you did this, or I'd love for my bank to do that, or have you thought about this, or whatever. And it became quite a lot, to deal with. And in the early days, Anson would answer everything himself, and I would answer things, and then Dan, our head of design, he would answer things. And eventually, the whole team was sharing that responsibility and getting back to customers either through Talk to Us or through social media. And it just became too much. Like our full-time job was responding to customers and not building software. So we now have a team, and we've got 12 people who their job is to rotate through and spend 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. One day we might move to 24, but really just servicing customers. And the roadmap helps with that, because one thing that we do is that we send a customer an answer to their query. We always like to be friendly and prompt, but we also send them, teach them how to fish. So we send them a link to the roadmap and saying, yes, we're going to do joint accounts. It's the number one thing that people are requesting. But we're not going to do it like any other bank you've ever seen in the world. We're going to do it totally differently, and you're going to love it. So hold tight, stick with us. And if you want a status update, or you want to know more about what we're doing in that space, check out the public roadmap. And then once you do that a few times, people start feeding themselves. People start actually going to fish. And so now they go to the public roadmap, and a lot of that traffic that was coming in as questions for us through social media or through Talk to Us is now going directly to the roadmap and saying, right, let me look at it for myself and see what are they building. So when you look at, say, joint accounts, you see that we're building shared accounts, we're building joint accounts, we're building multi-user accounts, we're building virtual accounts. And they're like, oh man, what does this mean? They're clicking on it, they're reading about it, and they're starting to understand why we didn't have that at launch and why we will have that over time. And I think that education of customers is just as important as publishing the roadmap itself. It's actually a two-way relationship. And we update the roadmap every other day, with the status of things. When we do software releases, we update the roadmap to say that we've delivered that now. And then, often Anson will add new things into the roadmap so it actually grows, just like a tree, like it literally grows. And we had the spring tree event where we got together in spring. It's pretty awesome. We sent out a note to our customers saying, we're going to get together. It's our very first physical event that we've ever run. It was in October last year. And if anyone's interested in coming along and checking out the new roadmap and listening to Anson and Dom, talk about, what we're going to do, let us know. We literally sold 300 tickets in 6 minutes or 9 minutes, or like less than 10 minutes. It was unbelievable. And so we were completely sold out. We're at capacity. And the only purpose of that event was to communicate the new roadmap. It was basically to say to people, it's springtime. The tree of Up is growing. We've watered it. It's growing. Come along and we'll have a chat about it. And we had some beers and we had some new merch, and we really just shared the vision of what we think banking will look like in 5 years, 10 years or whatever, and what the new roadmap looks like. But that sort of interaction with customers, face-to-face, over a beer, sharing some merch, talking about the future of banking, it's completely invaluable. It's quite emotional just thinking about it, because the people that turned up to that event were long-time upsiders that had been on board with us since our public beta. But there were also newbies there that had never used Up before and just thought it was unbelievable that a bank was having like this cool event at like the top of a pub and all this sort of stuff. So it was just like, I think that connection with customers and the roadmap as a communication tool, a two-way communication tool between customers and us, and Anson particularly, I think is a quite unique tool.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I have loved about the Tree of Up is just the clarity of thought that's gone into it, which I really admire. One of the things that you just kind of touched on in terms of communication and getting feedback and from customers is that, I can imagine, especially as we've spoken about how engaged your kind of audience and your customers are, in terms of providing feedback to you in terms of customer features or kind of, you mentioned everyone wanting kind of shared accounts as the next feature. How do you sort of balance out the, the inbound requests or the inbound kind of demand around things that you may not have sort of considered as high priority with what you've kind of set about on the roadmap and what your sort of own vision of the product is like?
I think it's a fairly delicate balancing act. And some people might have heard me say before that customers don't know what they want. And I think that the problem that, with a lot of new startups and also a lot of neobanks is that they think, we're building with our customers, we're doing it for customers, we're going to ask customers. Customers have no idea because they're just as frustrated as we are, and they're dealing with the incumbents. And the incumbents have no foresight, no vision. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just saying that they're basically a customer is blinkered because of what existing banks offer. And so it's the same in any industry. So you can't come along and say, well, there's nothing wrong with taxis. Taxis are fine. Go to the taxi rank, I get a taxi. It's all good. I ring up a taxi. Sometimes they come, sometimes they don't, but it's all fine. In order to think of Uber, you actually need to not ask a customer what they want. If you ask a customer, how do you want to get from here to the airport? They'll say, I just want to be able to book a taxi. You want to call a call center and book a taxi. Well, who would have thought that you could do it all in the app and you could see a map of the live taxi coming to you, and that you could rate your driver and, and that you wouldn't have to pay. It would just get subtracted automatically from essentially a subscription account, all this is stuff. Nobody would think of that. And a customer would never ask for that. So I just think it's a delicate balancing act. Yes, you have to be customer centric, and yes, customers have to be at the heart of everything you do. It's the only reason we exist. If we didn't have customers, we wouldn't be here. So that's absolutely critical. It doesn't take away from the importance of customer, but don't ask your customer what they want because they do not know. So for us, it's like, yes, we take all that feedback from customers and we prioritize it. It's very important, but it's one of probably three considerations. Another consideration is the business requirement. We have a regulatory environment, we have reporting, we have business partners, we have all sorts of things that we have to do in order to maintain privacy, security, data protection, authentication, auditing, all sorts of things. And those business requirements, they're pretty boring, but they're very important. And then the third one for us is what I call imagining, right? Which is the roadmap and Anson's brain and, the whiteboard sessions that we have and all the crazy ideas. Those three things together, put them in a blender, mix them up, whatever comes out, that's what we build. It's not quite that easy. There is a sort of a defined process. We have a regular product planning meeting. We often share things on Slack with just ideas. we do a demo every week, and nearly every week, Anson will demo some crazy new idea that we have. Sometimes they come from customers, sometimes they come from staff, sometimes they're, a mandatory regulatory requirement. But merging all those things together and then being able to prioritize them in some sort of order. I guess the other thing you manage is your capacity to deliver. So because we're all engineers and we're all thinking about software and we're all on the tools and we're delivering a lot, like a large quantum of technology. So we don't have to be as brutal in the prioritization because we can deliver more than the regular sort of bank, if you like. So for us, we just keep pushing things out the pipeline. And we actually find that each release we do, customers are sort of champing at the bit. They're waiting for that release and then they get it and they love to read the release notes and then they come back on social media and say how amazing it is, whatever. And so for us, it's about trying not to have any of those. Sometimes we do, but we try not to have releases where we're like fixed bugs, improved performance, like who cares? Customers don't care about that. What we want to do is, we've got this great new feature, or here's something that we've improved for you, or based on your feedback, we've done blah or whatever. And I think that each new release we have, we try to do something of significance for the customer. And I think that, so that's my sort of perspective, is that it's not as easy as just saying, hey, let's build this amazing new thing with our customers. That's just one part of the story. And you can't get too hooked up on that. To me, that's just marketing. That's just like trying to say, oh, we're customer centric, but actually it's not right. Customers need to be able to share with you what they want. Sometimes they don't know and you have to provide that direction. But you've really got to consider what they want. And I guess it's secret sauce. There's no magic answer. And I think every company would do it differently, but the way that we do it is rely on one person. So that's Anson. So there's ultimately someone who can make the final call. And if we are at our, leadership team debating about some new thing that we want to do or whatever it is, nearly always either me or my business partner will step in and say, right, well, Anson, you make that call, because he's the head of priority. He's the head of product. It's really up to him ultimately to make that decision. And I think that is an unusual way perhaps of doing it. But as I say, every team would have their own way of working and their own way of doing it. So I can't say exactly what the secret sauce is, but I can say that they're the different considerations that you would need to have. And then you would need to develop a process that considered those three different buckets, if you like, and came up with a way to arbitrate in case there's, issues or decisions that need to be made.
Yeah, it's all about surprising and delighting your customers. Yeah. I guess one kind of tangible example of that. So for context, I was with Commonwealth Bank since pretty much uni, and Up was the first other bank that I moved over to. And one of the features that I loved that I never thought that I would even want or kind of potentially use is every time I make a transaction, I get a notification with my balance and everything as well. And it's just a really good kind of insight for myself in terms of my own kind of spending habits without that necessarily being something that I would have thought that I had needed previously. How do you, and I've seen that with a couple of the different features that Up has launched as well. And I think you've kind of spoken about this on previous interviews in terms of, having a number of different savers that you can have, having emojis kind of set to them so people can kind of associate different buckets for savings. How do you if the customers aren't coming out with this and you are sort of coming up with sort of new product or feature ideas on your own, especially in an industry that's kind of been sort of known for being a little bit tone deaf or not really being sort of known to be close to customers. How do you sort of go about the approach of really understanding what your customers want? Where does that kind of initial sort of drive or that kernel of, actually this isn't something that's already in the market, but this is something that we know that our customers will potentially use or kind of fits into the way that they're existing, currently using our product or those sorts of things that would sort of add to their experience?
I mean, it might surprise some people, the answer to that. I mean, because one part of that answer is gut feeling, like guessing. Like we don't know, but we know what we want. We know what we like. And another answer to that is just trying things. So because we basically are able to deploy multiple times a day, we've reduced the barriers of change to nil. And that gives us an amazing superpower. And that superpower is that we can just try lots of things. We could try things with 100 customers or 100,000 customers. We could just, often we eat our own dog food, so we just test things ourselves internally. We can open up that alpha or beta testing to 1 customer, 10 customers, 100 customers, whatever. And so actually just guessing, guessing might sound a little bit flippant. They're educated guesses and we're very passionate about those things. I'll give you an example. One of our staff was just tinkering with an idea and said, check this out. One of the gestures that we don't use is the pull down feature. And a lot of people or use that gesture to refresh your activity feed. Now, many, many years ago, back in 2012, we actually invented the activity feed for banking. And I remember I was in Barcelona and we were launching at a fintech event, and we were launching our new banking platform that we developed. And there were no neobanks back then, and we were just building this for Bendigo Bank. And we had this idea to create an activity feed of all of your financial and your non-financial transactions in kind of a Facebook sort of timeline that was infinitely scrolling. And no bank in the world had that at the time. Every bank had like a paginated thing, whatever. Now every bank has a scrolling activity feed. They all think they invented it. That's fine. We're comfortable with that. But anyway, normally you would pull down to refresh that activity feed if you're using Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever your application is. In Up, we built a real-time activity feed that updates automatically. So it doesn't need to be pulled down. So that gesture wasn't being used. So one of the devs had this idea that what if you could pull down and it just saved your spare change? It'd be like when you're a kid and you had a money box and you come home with your coins and you pop your coins in there and then you smash it open on your 21st birthday and you have $400. It's sort of like, you can't do that with a mobile phone. So how do we do that? And so that gesture, it was just an idea, and they did a demo and we kind of liked it, but it could have flopped. It could have been ridiculous. Like everyone could have said, what are you wasting your time on that for? Just build joint accounts, just build BPay, whatever. And so it was a bit of a gamble, a bit of a gut feel that, hey, this could be a really interesting feature. This could actually help an entirely new generation of Australians to save their digital pocket change. And this could be amazing. And as it turned out, in the first 24 hours, we had 65,000 customers engage with this feature. And then people are tweeting about it, putting it on Instagram, they're Snapchatting about it. Like, it just went nuts. And now we've saved, our customers have saved over $10 million through roundups. And about half of that, about 5 million, has been through the pull to save feature and our boost. We have a roundup boost. And so roundups themselves, a lot of, there's only 3 banks in Australia that do roundups, and obviously, we built it first, but we were the second to launch it. But roundups is not enough. Like, roundups is just the beginning, and it's a great feature. But more than half of our money saved by our customers has been through pull to save or through our boost feature for our roundups. And so that just tells us that those little innovations, those little extra things that we do, can actually be completely unique, and they can actually change our customers' behaviour. And so by changing our customers' behavior, they're doing something they've never done before. Like, can you imagine being a young 16, 18-year-old and having never had coins? Like, you and I might take it for granted, but they don't use money like we do, right? Because we walk around with dollars and coins and whatever, and they've never had that. So, their parents pay their pocket change with Spree, so they have like an app. So they don't know about carrying around money and everything. So how do you save your spare change? There is no spare change. So yeah, that was a very minor insight, and it was a very easy, sort of simple feature to build, but it could have completely backfired for us. And so the way that we test that with customers is that we literally release it to customers and let customers be the judge. And sometimes we release things that are shit, like sometimes they're rubbish. And so we release them, customers don't like them, and that's okay. We just iterate, we just improve. And so we have no fear of doing that because we reduced the barriers of change to zero. Many companies, the barriers of change are significant. It's very expensive, very costly. It's a long process, and then you've got to do lots of testing. And then by the time you get it out to customers, you're beyond the point of no return. It's too hard to change your mind. Whereas for us, we just release something, test it with a few customers, test it with staff, roll it out to half our customers, roll it out to all our customers, see what the feedback's like, and then iterate and improve. And we just do that on a constant cycle. So actually making the decisions on what it is that we release and what we don't release is not as hard for us as it is for others, perhaps.
Dom, thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing your fantastic insights. We're just going to switch tack now and move over to some audience Q&A. So just a reminder for those people that are tuning in live, the Q&A function is open. So if you want to submit any questions, I'll pick out a handful from there, as well as people that submitted questions through the registration process. The first one is from Nishane. And Dom, you mentioned kind of when you spoke about launching a product roadmap and not really being afraid of competitors, but competitors starting to copy you in the market as well. How do you sort of, the question is, how do you sort of stay fresh and stay ahead of the competition with growing and retaining customer base with neobanks like Zinja and 86400 in the market now?
Yeah. I guess first off, we're growing at a rate that is bigger than all of those guys combined. So the first thing is we have a lot more scale, and we are continuing to innovate because of those things that we talked about. So I guess, quite a few of the elements of the answer to that question we've touched on. So having the public roadmap distracts our competitors because they're trying to copy us rather than innovate. Having a really engaged customer base means that we can release new features and they give us a lot of feedback and there's a lot of passion there. Having the delivery cadence that we have means that we can release stuff a lot faster. I think that the piece that we haven't talked a lot about is continuing to innovate. So every day we're doing new and interesting things, and a lot of the features that we release will be a first in Australia or a first in the world. And so for us, the answer to that is really all of those things I mentioned, but also just continuing to innovate. We don't look at our competitors. We're not interested in what they're doing. All we're interested in is what we're doing. And so we just keep focusing on going a million miles an hour and delivering new things all the time. And it just keeps us so far ahead. So probably the first thing is that we have a significant first mover advantage, probably a year or more on our competitors, which has been really great. We don't actually see the neos as our competitors, to be honest. Most of our customers come from the big four banks, ING and Macquarie, so there's a couple of mid-tiers. And so they're who we're really competing with. I mean, everyone, or most of the people at Up, most of the people working at Ferocia, used ING before we built Up. And so it's a great bank and it's got some great features, but it's a very traditional bank and it has very traditional stuff. And so for us, it was how do we actually, leverage their success? I mean, in some ways, what ING did 18 years ago was inspirational. They were the first to launch sort of high interest savers into the Australian market. It's probably a little bit stagnant now. And what we've tried to do is bring something new and fresh to it. So really the answer to the question is we just keep innovating, and that maintains our competitive advantage and then also wins over new customers and keeps it fresh.
The next question is from the co-founder of Propeller Aero and one of my colleagues as well, Francis Beerboom, who said, Up has the nicest onboarding process in the world. How can you, can you describe how your design team is structured and the process that they follow?
Yeah. So just to start with, I guess, fastidious pursuit of quality. A lot of people copy what we do, but what they deliver is pretty ordinary. For us, it's about improving forever. I don't know if you heard of the aggregation of marginal gains. It's a sort of, I guess, it came out of originally the concept I think was coined in the cycling industry, in sort of sports, cycling, bike racing. And what it was, you can't go any faster and there's drug cheats and all this sort of stuff. It's really hard to sort of, be the world champion or whatever. But what they found, I think it was the British team, is they found that if they just improve by 1%, and they do that every day, every week, every month, and just keep improving the little 1%ers, a little bit here, a little bit there, remove the stickers from the bike, tighten the bolts, remove a bit of foam from the seat, change the posture by 2 degrees, all this sort of stuff. These little tiny, minor 1%ers all add up over time to be a significant. Now that is really important for Up. So the first thing is that we've got to think really big. And then the second thing is we have to have a absolutely religious pursuit of quality. And so design being embedded in what we do is just kind of a given. A lot of the people on the team are designers or ex-designers, so some of them are engineers, developers. I had a design company a few years ago, so I'm very, very passionate about design and making sure that's embedded in what we do. So the way we've structured it is similar to what we've done in product, is that we said, okay, Anson is responsible for product, and then he builds the team the way that he wants to build the team. We don't have any guidelines or directions. Similarly with design, it took about 2 years to recruit Dan Werner, we call him, into the role, and he's our head of design. Once we got him on board, we gave him pretty much free rein to build that design team however he sees fit. But one of the things that he did was, or probably two things I can think of. One of them is we had a whiteboard session, and he basically said to me, forget about banking. Think about the things that people love in life. What are the things that people love? And what are the apps and what are the industries that people are involved in? And it wouldn't matter if it's Facebook or Twitter or Google or Instagram or Etsy or WhatsApp or eBay or whatever it is. What are the things that people love? And he says, they're up here. And where are we? We're down here. How do we get from here up to here in 2 or 3 years? How do we do that? We have to actually want to do that. So that was the first thing I thought was, it's a very simple goal. Forget about banking. How do we become the app that people want to open every day, all the time, and engage with and love? And then the second thing he said was, we're not building a design team. There's no such thing as a design team. Everyone in our team is a designer, and design needs to be embedded into our thinking and embedded into what we do. So when we have a product kickoff, or we come up with a new idea that we want to build, or we're going to delve into a particular feature or whatever. It's not about getting an engineer and an architect and a designer and putting them in a room together. I mean, that's just bullshit. What we actually need to do is we need to have design thinking embedded in the way that we architect the product, in the way that we build the product, in the way that we deliver the product. So actually having that design embedded into our thinking is like almost, there is no design team. There is a design team, but the design team is embedded as part of our greater team. And that is, they're the two, I would say, key insights that I took away from the last couple of years of working with Dan. And I think he's amazing, but I think also everyone in his team is amazing. And everyone in the broader Ferocia team is amazing. And I think that is how you build great design into a process, is not by saying, hey, let's go and build a design team. It's, hey, how do we build design into everything we do?
Just mindful of time, I'm going to combine two questions that were submitted by two different people. So Fernando Parra and Chris Titley. Chris's question is more around how do you think that Australian banks will survive the potential recession that comes off the back of the current pandemic? And Fernando's question is, what do you think that banking looks like over the next 10 years? So how do you expect, I guess, things to change, if at all, kind of beyond this current period over the next few months and years, as well as, how are you sort of seeing the future of banking over time?
Yeah, so I guess to start with, and I'll come to banks and fintech, but let me just name some of the companies that came out of the most recent recessions, and really difficult global, financial crisis and all that sort of stuff. So some of these companies you might not have heard of. They're only small companies: Netflix, Airbnb, WhatsApp, Instagram, Uber, Pinterest, Slack, Google Ventures, Electronic Arts, Adobe, Microsoft, Wikipedia. The list goes on. And if you want to go back to the Great Depression and that sort of stuff, General Electric, Disney, these companies, Hewlett Packard, these companies that come out of hard times are the companies of the future. So when it comes to, say, fintech and banking, there's not a lot of new neobanks. They've only been around for a few years, so there's none that I can say came out of the financial crisis. But if you think back to the GFC, what are the fintechs that came out of the financial crisis? And again, some companies you might not have heard of, Stripe, Square, Venmo, Wealthfront, Kickstarter, TransferWise. Like these are the enduring great, financial services software companies of the future. And so actually this crisis that we're in right now will separate, the wheat from the chaff. That the companies that were not doing very well are going to suffer and die. The companies that are, were always bound for greatness are going to come out even stronger. What I find interesting is that, I have friends and family and colleagues that are losing their jobs, that are really struggling. It's a horrible, horrible time to be going through. But what that does is strengthen the entrepreneurial spirit. It actually provides an environment for people building startups to, find a niche or to find a problem and to solve that problem, and to solve a problem that's for society, not just for banking. And so in terms of answering the question about the future, I think that a number of the incumbents and the neobanks are going to double down on building the digital bank into people's lives, are going to embed banking into the future. So nobody wants banking. Nobody ever asked me for banking. But people come to me all the time asking me how they can improve the payment experience, or how they can save up for their first home, or how they can, send money to their friend easier, or whatever it is. So people want to live their lives, and I don't have a crystal ball, but the future of banking is living.
On that note, Dom, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. I think you've made available a special offer for the listeners of the show.
Yep. So if anybody wants to get onto Up, then what we've done just for this show is that if you use the word startup when you're signing up and just type it in, all one word, you get $10 in your account. So the reason we do that is that it's just a little token gesture to get you started, but it means that you can sign up, and in less than 3 minutes, you can go and buy your first coffee, or buy a salad, or buy a Mars bar, or a Big Mac, or whatever it is you like. It is more difficult at the moment with social isolation and all that sort of stuff. But you can buy something online. So yeah, if you just type in startup when you're signing up, then you'll get $10 on us. So as a thank you for signing up.
Thank you so much, Dom, for making that offer available. I'll make sure I'll include that in the into the show notes for this interview. Dom, once again, thank you for taking the time, and everyone that tuned in for this interview, thank you so much for taking the time again to join us this morning. As I mentioned last week, this will be part of a weekly series where I go live at 8 a.m. every Tuesday. And next week, we are delighted to have Michael Foxx, who is the former co-founder and CEO of Shoes of Prey, which raised $35 million, and is now the co-founder and CEO of a company called Fable Foods, which uses mushroom to create alternative meats. So again, we'll be going live from 8 to 9 a.m. On Tuesday, the 12th of May. I'll make sure that I share a link to the registration page for that as well. But Dom, once again, thank you for your time, and thank you all for joining us, and hope to see you next week.
No worries. Thanks for having me. It was great. See you.
Bye. Thanks for listening to episode 110 of the Startup Playbook podcast. As always, full show notes from this interview will be available at startupplaybook.co. I'll be going live again at 8 a.m. next Tuesday, the 12th of May, with our next guest for the show, Michael Foxx, who is the former co-founder and CEO of Shoes of Prey, which raised $35 million in VC funding from some of the leading investors around the world, as well as partnering up with the likes of Maya and Nordstrom. And he is now the co-founder and CEO of Fable Food Co., which utilizes mushroom to create alternative meats. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this interview, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.